Okay, so if you use that, and by the way, I'd say to some of my friends from other states, some of the senators, yours isn't going to deviate too much from that, because Oklahoma is not that much different than from some other states. So what did it cost you to on the four largest, what I call the four largest earmarks? If you apply that to Oklahoma, each family in Oklahoma who files a tax return, it would cost each family $5,683. Now that's each family that files a tax return. Now, in earmarks, the total of all projects requested by me in 2008 was 80 million. Most of these were military things, some of which I just talked about. And so if you apply the same factor to $80 million, it would cost each family in Oklahoma 40 cents. Now, I hope you look at this now. Each family, 40 cents, as opposed to the four largest thing, $5,683. Now, I had said that because I think it's important that we look at these things and see how much, try to quit talking in terms of billions and trillions of dollars and know what it is for each family. Now, even though I'm ranked as the most conservative member by many organizations, I'm a big spender in three areas. One is national defense. Two is infrastructure. That's the roads, highways, bridges. We have a crumbling infrastructure throughout America. I think we all understand that. The governor of Pennsylvania and I have talked about that. He's a far left-wing liberal. I'm a conservative. And yet we agree that infrastructure is very important. That's something that government's supposed to be doing. And the third thing, where I could be considered a big spender, is in unfunded mandates. When I was a mayor of a city at one time, I often tell my friends in the Senate, I say to the chair, that if you want a hard job, become a mayor. Because there's no hiding place when you're a mayor, right? And so if there's a problem, they don't like the trash system, it ends up in your front yard. It did. I was there. And so that is something that where we should be spending. But if you go back to chart 4, and put chart 4 back up, we got to follow this kind of carefully. OMB stated our earmarks for 2010 were $11 billion. Now they have their definition of earmarks, so people are now saying, well, that's a good definition. So these four obligations, which let's just say they're not earmarks, but they could be defined as that. That would be $1.2 trillion. If you would take the $11 billion and do your math, you would find that the earmarks are 1/100th of what just these four spending bills, just these four, just 1/100th. In other words, if the total amount of the 2010 earmarks were only 1% of these huge spending bills. Now, of the three drivers of the earmark wagon, Senator McCain voted for all four of these, and or supported all four of these. Senator Coburn, my junior senator, a good friend, a brother, some people know what I'm talking about. He voted for half of them, $750 billion. And Senator DeMint and I opposed all four. Now, my point is that the public has been focusing so intently on earmarks, that 1% figure, that they overlooked the huge bills that spend 100 times more than all the earmarks, and we ended up with the $13.4 trillion increase in the debt, and then my 20 kids and grandkids having to pay for $3 trillion of the deficit increase. Now, that kind of left out Senator DeMint. And let me say this, and I say this in love, but I think it's very important that we understand that there is a commitment on behalf of every senator, all 100 senators in this chamber, to help people in the people's states. And I have that as well as he does. So let's talk just for a minute about Senator DeMint. In 2004, the Republicans were majority. I was the chairman of the Environment Public Works Committee. That takes care of all the transportation, all roads, highways, infrastructure, and that type of thing. When I was chairman, at Senator DeMint's request, I flew to South Carolina to support his commitment to highway earmarks. He promised the South Carolinians funding and said, quote, I am not only supportive of I-73 and other projects, but I have a good working relationship with people who can help get it done. I guess that was me. But subsequent to that, Senator DeMint successfully got 13 earmarks in place, places like Myrtle Beach, Beaufort County Engineering Design and Construction for $15 million, then $10 million for a port access road, and the list goes on and on. But I tell you what, it does actually get a little bit better as we look into it, because on September the 30th of '09, there was a vote on a $2.5 billion amendment to add 10 additional Charleston, South Carolina based C-17s. $2.5 billion. And the Citizens Against Government Waste listed this as the single largest defense earmark of 2009. Senator DeMint voted for it, and South Carolina was very, very appreciative. It was the largest, single largest defense earmark of 2009. And just last week, Senator DeMint told the Greenville News that he wants to reform the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to get back the money South Carolina contributes. He's going after specific funding, $400,000, in that, whether the money comes from the Corps of Engineers or the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, is still an earmark under anyone's definition. So he wants to put that money into a fund and study and deepen the channel rather than operations and O&M. But I have to say he should do that. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's doing what the Constitution tells him to do. He's looking after the needs of people in South Carolina. I mean, I'm not sure, and I'm looking after the needs of people in Oklahoma. I'm not sure that if we left this up to President Obama that he would be very generous to South Carolina or Oklahoma. So I'm defending him, saying that he's entitled to do this, and he should be doing it. And this is why Hamilton and Madison gave the power to spend to the legislature. Now, all those earmarks, and you might say that Senator DeMint is adaptable. Kind of reminds me of the guy that had been out of town for 2 years, and he called up his dearest friends. Mr. President, he said to his friends, he said, "Well, Mary, how are you doing? This is Tom." She said, "Tom, so good to hear from you. It's been 2 years." And Tom said, "Well, how's old Jim getting along?" And she said, "Why, didn't you know? Jim's dead." He said, "No, what happened?" He said, "Well, he went down to the garden to pick some beans for dinner and leaned over and had a heart attack and fell on his face, dead." And he said, "Oh, you poor thing, Mary, whatever did you do?" And she said, "There's only one thing we could do. We had to open a can of peas." You see, it's nothing wrong with being adaptable, and I think that Senator DeMint is. So I think we're talking about not a can of peas, but a can of worms. The government does have a function to provide infrastructure, roads, highways, and all of this. And I'll bring this out because and I'll mention a couple others in a minute, people are, they are concerned about their states. Now, there's one significant factor that needs to be elaborated on at this point. And on one of the arguments that I thought was not a sound argument they used, they said, earmarks are a gateway drug that needs to be eliminated in order to demonstrate that we are serious about fiscal restraint. There's just one problem with that. It's not true. According to the Office of Management and Budget and federal spending watchdog groups, such as the Citizens Against Government Waste, the earmarks have dramatically decreased over the past several years. OMB, that's Office of Management and Budget, they said in '05, the total earmarks were $18.9 billion. In '08, they were $16.6 billion. In '09, $15.3 billion. In 2010, $11.1 billion. Now, wait a minute. That means that why do you suppose that they are reducing every year? They are because we are demanding more light so that people can know what they're spending money on. So, I'd say the earmarks are hardly a gateway drug, a symptom of federal spending, run amok, or even underlying cause to our fiscal problems. But why? Because we have shed light on earmarks. Now, let us add why its shining light can be the first stop. In 2009, the Senate performed a rare action of considering many appropriation bills individually rather than the irresponsibly lumping them, like we're doing today, into one vote at the end of the year. Now, the value of that, considering them individually, is that it gives senators the opportunity to exercise some oversight of government programs and to monitor how federal departments spend money. So in 2009, senators could offer amendments to both cut spending and strike particular earmarks if they desired. From July until November of that year, 2009, there were 18 votes specifically targeting earmarks. All the amendments failed, but had they succeeded, it wouldn't have reduced the overall amount of money being spent by federal government by one dime. Instead of putting money back into the pockets of the American people by reducing spending or shrinking the deficit, these efforts to eliminate earmarks would have put the money into the hand of President Obama by allowing his administration to spend the money as he saw fit. At the end of the day, none would have saved money. President Obama is the winner. The American people are the loser. In another case, members offered amendments to strike funding out of the program called Save America's Treasures. You've heard a lot about this. And the specific things around here, they offered amendments to strike them. And they did strike them. But what happened? Did it save any money? No. That went back to the unelected bureaucrats at the National Park Service to spend it. Well, that's the Obama administration. He's the one who calls the shots there. So it didn't save a cent. Another case, a member offered an amendment to strike a variety of transportation projects in quite a few states, only to redirect the spending to the Obama administration and the unelected bureaucrats in the Federal Highway Administration. Not one of these actions saved a dime, but made President Obama happy because it all went back to his coffers. Now, I point this out because there is a solution. We have clearly demonstrated, we've made a point here. And the point is, number one, and no one can deny this, that the spending is the exclusive constitutional obligation and right of the Senate and the House. And killing earmarks doesn't save a dime, but can be the first stop in a real solution. And that gets back to my Senate Bill 3939. I'm very proud of that, and I would like to say that there's a happy ending to this story, mostly because of that Senate bill. Now, I'd like to take credit for that, but I'm not going to do it because I can't. I wasn't that smart. But there are 8 great Americans, and put that chart up, if you would, Luke. The great Americans and conservative groups they represent. Tom Schatz is the president of Citizens Against Government Waste. Melanie Sloan, director of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Steve Ellis, Taxpayers for Common Sense. Craig Hallman, Public Citizens. Jim Walsh, Rick Gold, Manny Revelis, and Dan Winhold. And thanks to them, we can put the earmark issue to rest. They authored the 5, leave that one up there. Let's put the 5 principles that they offered. They offered the 5 principles of earmark reform. And I will list these. The chart 8 shows what they are. Starting at the top. They said what we need to do is have, and I have to say this, Senate Bill 3939, I got to write this down, will address all of these specifically. And unless you guys, there are a lot of people in Washington that go to a lot of work, making a lot of studies, and they assume we never do read these things or care. Well, if you believe that, you're wrong, because I listened, and this is the result. The 5 principles of earmark reform. What we're saying here is we know, and it doesn't matter what you do in having a ban on earmarks, they're going to be voting and supporting things in their state. Everyone is. And I can assure you that's going to happen. The senator from Oregon, the rest of them this is going to happen. So, the first one, to cut the cord between earmarks and campaign contributions, Congress should limit earmarks directed to campaign contributors. Limiting total contributions from the earmark beneficiary and its affiliates to no more than $5,000 would help restore public confidence. Now, this came from those 8 great groups that really evaluated this as to what we can do to clean up this system. Well, Senate Bill 3939 that I just introduced does exactly that. Section 2 says, no earmark beneficiary shall make contributions aggregating more than $5,000 to any requesting candidate with respect to such earmark beneficiary. All right, the second, so it's done. That first is met. The second one, to eliminate any connection between legislation and campaign contributions, legislative staff should be barred from participating in fundraising activities. The attendance of legislative staff at fundraisers suggests a connection between the campaign donations and earmarks. And so we handle that with Senate Bill 3939. It does just that. It limits, under Section 3, limits on staff attendance of a member's fundraiser, except as provided in subsection B, an employee of the personal staff of a member of Congress shall not attend a political fundraiser on behalf of a member of Congress for whom they are employed. Section B, the exception would be a member of Congress may designate one employee who shall not be subject to this restriction. There are a lot of reasons. I think people know that there can be someone who might have to have maybe someone driving them, or someone, there could be threats, and they may need to have some security. I think people understand that. All right, the third thing they came up with, to increase transparency, Congress should create a new database of all congressional earmarks. Now, what they went on to say, the information about lawmakers' earmark requests is scattered across hundreds of websites in a variety of formats with differing levels of details. The funding levels for each earmark award are listed in a chart at the end of each spending bill. And while the data is technically available, it's virtually impossible to collect, understand, and analyze all of the earmark information. Congress should create a unified, searchable, sortable, downloadable database on the public website. Well, my S3939 I just introduced an hour ago does exactly that. Section 4 reads, the Secretary of the Senate and the Clerk of the House of Representatives shall post on a public website of their respective houses a link to the earmark database maintained by the Office of Management and Budget. Done. 4, the fourth concern there is to ensure taxpayer money has been spent appropriately. The Government Accountability Office should randomly audit earmarks. Because oversight is essential to maintain integrity in the earmarking process, the Government Accountability Office should develop and implement a system to audit the reports to Congress regularly on programs and projects. This does this, and I'm going to read our Section 7. This was a more difficult one, but it's airtight. Not later than December 31st of 2011, and each year thereafter, the Comptroller General shall submit a report to Congress that uses the OMB database, 1, to randomly select a percentage of each of the programs and projects funded through earmarks in a preceding fiscal year, 2, to conduct an audit on each selected program or project reporting on the amount, purpose, term, requesting member, and the present state of completion of the program or project, and 3, if the earmark contributes to an already existing program or project, to provide a detailed accounting of how the earmark contributed to each program and project. That was the request. And we came with the section that is, I say, airtight in solving that problem. Now, number 5, to promote congressional responsibility without stifling innovation, members should certify earmark recipients are qualified to handle the project. And the last language that we have on that was that so that Section 6 and a certification that the recipient is qualified to handle the project if applicable. Now, you might say that's great. We've resolved all of the problems that are out there. And this was a combination of the intellects of all the people that I mentioned a while back, so that they looked at all the problems that are there and how can we resolve those problems. But one thing was overlooked, and so we have a second in our Senate Bill 3939. We go one step further. It demands, now listen to this, Mr. President, this demands the same transparency to Obama bureaucratic earmarks as it does to senatorial earmarks. Well, that's kind of neat. So if we do that, and I'll read in Section 5, not later than July 1st of 2011, the head of each department and agency of the federal government shall post on a public website the department of that department, that's each department of government now, or agency, a link to a searchable database that lists each contract, grant, cooperative agreement, and other expenditure made by the department or agency listing with respect to the expenditure, the amount, purpose, term, and office making such an expenditure. Well, now, why is that necessary? I can remember Sean Hannity about 6 months ago came out with a series one night where he talked about the 102 most egregious earmarks that were brought up. Now, here's something that's really interesting about it. I was so excited when I saw these. I read them all, came down, stood right here on the Senate floor, and I went over and read all and described all 102 earmarks. Where's that thing that shows them? Yeah, just look at some of the things that we're talking about here. These were, Sean Hannity's $3.4 million to construct an echo passage for turtles. That's really nice. It's $450,000 to build 22 concrete toilets in a Mark Twain National Forest. $300,000 for helicopter equipment to detect radioactive rabbit droppings. $500,000 for a grant to a researcher named in the ClimateGate scandal. Well, I wish we had another hour. I'd like to talk about that. $325,000 to study the mating decisions of female cactus bugs. Now, I said, after reading all 102, this is just 5 of them, all 102, I said, what do all these have in common? What they have in common is that not one of them was a congressional earmark. They were all earmarks that were put in there by the Obama administration. And so here's the problem you have. If you ban congressional earmarks, you're going to have more of this. Because as you restrict what Congress can do, that same amount of money goes back into the administration, whether it's the Department of Interior, the Corps of Engineers, the EPA, or any of the rest of them. And consequently, that doesn't get done. So is there any question why President Obama embraced the ban on the earmarks? Because he wants the money to go with him. But S3939 is going to curb that. And I think this actually could have a very happy ending, because the 5 principles of earmark assembled by the 8 individuals that I mentioned, this is an ingenious document. And now those who recognize, and even the Tea Party people recognize that you have an obligation to your states. Let me congratulate Senator-to-be Rand Paul for his statement on Sunday, November 7th, 2010, wherein he stated that he told the people in Kentucky that he will work through the committee process to get things done for Kentucky. But it has to be under a particular overall budget. I agree. I'm with him. I've had the same conversation with Marco Rubio. I'm with them. They recognize that the president does not have the knowledge of each state's needs or others. So with these safeguards and the passage of 3939, it resolves the whole earmark dilemma and puts it to rest. And one good thing about the ban, we got to tackle the deficit. And as long as we continue, as we did in the last 2 years, to stand on the floor of this Senate and go hour after hour after hour talking about the earmark problem, which is 1% of the total discretionary spending, we're not going to be able to address the real problem. And that is the increase of the debt to $13.4 trillion, the largest increase in the history of America, larger than any of the other increases, all the way from George Washington to George W. Bush, and in saddling my 20 kids and grandkids with $3 trillion of extra spending. And so that's the problem that we have. And I would have to say that, as I learned in my successful battle against the cap and trade, truth eventually triumphs. Winston Churchill said, truth is incontrovertible. Panic may resent it, ignorance may deride it, malice may destroy it, but there it is. And I believe that's what we're getting closer and closer to. The end result will be that Senator will be able to continue to work for the needs of the states, as Senator DeMint is doing and as I'm doing right now. But first, all of the reforms necessary to clean up the process will occur. And secondly, we can limit the President Obama or any future president from claiming taking our constitutional rights by subjecting him to the same transparency. I think this is very significant. And I just believe, after all this talk, all these years, and particularly in the last 2 years, that we can now are at the point where we can go ahead and satisfy everyone. If they want to ban earmarks, fine, ban earmarks. But at the same time, put the clarity in, the transparency in the system that is going to clean it up, and I believe that's what's going to happen. So I guess we can say we can have it both ways. It looks like we're going to be able to do that. With that, I yield the floor.